In the heart of the Tar Desert, where golden sands stretch endlessly beneath an unforgiving sun, there exists a story that the winds still whisper. A story of love that bloomed like a desert rose, only to be scattered by the same winds that carried its fragrance. This is not a tale with a neat ending tied in a bow. This is real. This is raw. This is an unfinished love story from the desert. Imagine two souls finding each other amidst the stark beauty of the dunes, their connection as vibrant as the colorful textiles of Rajasthan. Their laughter echoed in the ancient forts, their promises were written on the shifting sands. But the desert is as cruel as it is beautiful. Forces beyond their control, traditions as old as the sand itself, and the harsh realities of life conspired against them. What happened to this love? Join us as we piece together the fragments of this hauntingly beautiful tale. Our story begins in 1987, in a small village called Kuri, just outside the golden city of Jaisalmer in Rajasthan. Picture this: homes made of mud with roofs of thatch, lawn camel caravans passing silently at dawn, and a community so tight-knit that everyone's joys and sorrows were shared by all. This is where Vikram lived. At 24 years old, he was the son of a humble craftsman, a man who carved intricate designs into wood and stone. Vikram inherited his father's skilled hands, but his heart belonged to poetry. Every evening, after a long day of work, he would climb the highest sand dune near his village. There, he would write verses about the endless desert, the brilliant stars, and dreams of a life that stretched far beyond the sand. And then there was Mira. Mira was not from Kuri. She came from a wealthy family in Jodhpur, educated, sophisticated, everything Vikram's world was not. Her father owned successful textile businesses that spanned across Rajasthan. She had studied literature in Delhi and was back home for her cousin's grand wedding in Jaisalmer. The wedding festivities were set to last for a whole week, and on the third day, her family organized a desert safari for all the guests, and that's when fate decided to write its own script. The safari brought the entire wedding party to Kuri village. As the guests explored the local crafts and vibrant culture, Mira found herself wandering away from the main group. She was drawn to a small, quiet workshop where she heard the soft, rhythmic sound of someone reciting poetry. It was Vikram, completely absorbed, carving a wooden panel while lost in his own words. Their eyes met. For a moment, the world stood still. She asked him about the poetry. With hands that trembled just slightly, he shared his worn notebook with her. As she read his words, something inside her shifted. Here was a man from a world so completely different from her own, yet his verses touched her soul in a way that none of the educated, polished men from her circles ever had. They talked for 2 hours that day, about poetry, about dreams, about the desert and all its hidden mysteries. When the safari group finally called for Mira, she left reluctantly, but not before promising to return the very next day. And she did. For the next 4 days, while her family was busy with wedding ceremonies, Mira found every excuse she could to visit Kuri. She would sit with Vikram under the shade of a large neem tree, talking, laughing, and discovering the worlds hidden within each other. Love doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't wait for the right circumstances or the perfect moment. It simply happens. And in those 4 brief days under the vast desert sky, Vikram and Mira fell deeply, irrevocably in love. But their story was just beginning. They knew their path wouldn't be easy. Her family, with their status and wealth, would never approve of a poor craftsman from a small village. His community might not understand his love for a woman from the city. The desert that brought them together now stood as a vast obstacle between their two worlds. They decided to meet in secret. Vikram would travel to Jaisalmer, and they'd find quiet corners in the city as ancient forts and bustling markets to spend a few precious hours together. He brought her poems written on scraps of paper, and she brought him books from the city, opening his mind to new ideas and authors. Each meeting was a risk, filled with the fear of being discovered, but their love only grew stronger with every stolen moment. They were two souls from different universes trying to build a bridge between them. One evening, as they sat overlooking the city from the top of the Jaisalmer fort, Mira's father's men found them. The moment they had dreaded was finally here. Mira was immediately taken back to Jodhpur and kept under strict watch. Her family was furious. They forbade her from ever seeing Vikram again and started arranging her marriage to a man from a respectable business family. Vikram was threatened and warned to stay away. For weeks, they were completely cut off from each other. The silence was deafening. It felt like their beautiful, fleeting dream was over. But Vikram wasn't ready to give up. He sold the few valuable things he owned, packed a small bag, and left his village. He had no plan, only a single-minded determination to find Mira. He knew that love like theirs was worth fighting for, no matter the odds. His journey to Jodhpur was long and difficult. When he finally arrived, he found a city that was vast and intimidating. He didn't know where to begin. For days, he wandered the streets, his hope dwindling with each passing sunset. He eventually found work as a laborer at a construction site, earning just enough to survive. He spent his evenings near the city's grand mansions, hoping for a glimpse of Mira. One day, while working near a large textile market, he overheard a conversation about Mira's family. He learned where they lived. With his heart pounding, he went to their house, a massive, imposing building that screamed of wealth and power. He knew he couldn't just walk in, so he waited. For 3 days, he waited outside, hoping to see her. On the third night, he saw a light turn on in a window on the upper floor. He took a chance. He began to recite one of the first poems he had ever written for her. Inside, Mira heard his voice. Her heart stopped. It couldn't be. She ran to the window and saw him standing there, a lone figure in the dark street below. Tears streamed down her face. In that moment, she knew she couldn't live a life of comfort and luxury without him. She made a choice. That night, she packed a small bag, climbed down from her balcony, and ran into his arms. They fled Jodhpur together, with nothing but each other and an unshakable belief in their love. They traveled far away to a small town where no one knew their past. Life was incredibly hard at first. Vikram worked odd jobs, and Mira, who had never known hardship, learned to live with very little. But they were happy. They had their freedom, and they had each other. Vikram continued to write poetry, and Mira, with her education, helped him get his work published in local magazines. Slowly, people started to recognize his talent. His words, born from the desert and forged in love and struggle, resonated with many. Years passed. Vikram's poetry became famous, not just in their small town, but across the country. He became a celebrated poet, invited to literary festivals and universities. Mira stood by his side, his partner, his editor, and his greatest inspiration. They eventually returned to Rajasthan, not as a poor craftsman and a runaway rich girl, but as a respected artist and his brilliant wife. They even visited Kuri, where it all began. They built a small library in the village, filled with books for the children, hoping to give them the same window to the world that Mira had given Vikram. Their love story, once a whispered secret, became a legend, a testament to the idea that true love can conquer any divide, whether it's the sands of a desert or the walls of society. The wedding was over, and Mira returned to the bustling city of Jodhpur, but this wasn't the end of their story. No, this was just the beginning. They started writing to each other. You have to remember, this was 1987. There were no mobile phones, no internet, no instant messages pinging back and forth. There were only handwritten letters carried by the postal service, taking days, sometimes weeks, to cross the distance. Vikram, ever the romantic, would write to her every 3 days. His letters weren't just updates. They were poems, they were observations, They were little pieces of his heart laid bare on paper. He'd write about a sunset he saw that reminded him of the vibrant color of her Depata. He'd describe the deep loneliness of the desert at night and how it mirrored the emptiness in his chest now that she was gone. Mira's letters were different, but every bit as passionate. She wrote about her life in Jodhpur, about feeling like a stranger in her own home because her heart had remained behind in the quiet sands of Kori. She confessed her growing dread as her father started, making plans to arrange her marriage to a wealthy businessman's son. For 8 long months, these letters flew back and forth. They became a lifeline for both of them, a secret world that belonged only to them, a world no one else could touch. And then Vikram did something incredibly bold. He packed a small bag and traveled all the way to Jodhpur. He found her address from one of her letters and waited outside her house one evening, his heart pounding, just hoping for a single glimpse of her. And then she appeared. She came out onto the terrace, maybe to feel the evening breeze, and she saw him. The sheer, unadulterated joy that lit up her face, even from that distance, told Vikram everything he needed to know. After that, they began meeting in secret. A quiet corner in a garden here, the ancient steps of a temple there. They stole moments together that felt both exhilarating and absolutely terrifying. They weren't naive. They knew what they were doing was dangerous. Mira's influential family would never, ever accept a poor craftsman from a small desert village. And Vikram's family, though humble, had their own pride, their own traditions to uphold. But love has a way of making you brave. And sometimes it makes you a little bit foolish. After 3 months of these clandestine meetings, they made a decision. A huge one. They would stop hiding. They would tell their families. They would fight for their love, no matter the cost. Vikram spoke to his father first. The old man was shocked, of course, and deeply concerned for his son's future. But ultimately, his love for his son won out. He placed a hand on Vikram's shoulder and said, "If this is truly what your heart wants, then I will stand with you. But be prepared, Beta. The world is not always kind to those who dare to love beyond their station." Mira's conversation with her family, well, that went very, very differently. When Mira told her parents about Vikram, the house erupted. It was a storm of fury and tears. Her father, his face a mask of rage, shouted, "You will destroy this family's reputation. A craftsman from a village. Have you lost your mind? We have given you everything, education, freedom, and this is how you repay us." Her mother's sobs filled the room, a heartbreaking soundtrack to the unfolding drama. Her brothers, protective and angry, threatened to find this man and teach him a lesson for daring to pursue their sister. But Mira, though trembling, stood her ground. "I love him, Papa," she pleaded, her voice steady despite the chaos. "He is more educated in his soul than any man you want me to marry. He sees me, he understands me." Her words, however, were like stones thrown into a raging river. They simply disappeared. Her pleas fell on deaf ears. The family's decision was swift and cruel. They locked her in her room, a prisoner in her own home. They cut off all her communication, taking her phone, severing her connection to the outside world. And in a final act of erasure, they gathered the letters she had so carefully saved from Vikram, the tangible proof of their love, and burned them to ash. Meanwhile, back in the quiet desert village of Kori, the sudden silence from Mira was deafening for Vikram. Days turned into a week, then 2. The usual flow of letters had stopped completely. A cold dread began to creep into his heart. He sent 5 more letters, each one more desperate than the last, his words filled with worry and confusion. None were answered. The silence was a wall he couldn't break through. Finally, unable to bear the uncertainty any longer, he decided he had to go to Jodhpur. He had to know she was safe. When he arrived at her grand house and asked to see her, it wasn't Mira who came to the door. It was her brothers. Their faces were grim, their intentions clear. They didn't just warn him. They beat him, not severely enough to cause lasting damage, but enough to send a clear, brutal message. They told him to leave their sister alone, to forget her, to crawl back to his village and never return. Bruised, his body aching and his heart shattered, Vikram made the long journey back to Kori. The desert landscape seemed to mirror the emptiness he felt inside. But even then, beaten and heartbroken, he didn't give up. There was one last thing he had to do. He picked up a pen and began to write one more letter. A final letter. He poured everything into it, every shared dream, every whispered promise, every ounce of love and pain. He wrote, "Mira, my love, if you truly want me to leave, just send me one word. Just write goodbye, and I will disappear from your life forever. I will respect your decision. But if there is even a small part of you that still wants this, that still wants us, then please find a way to let me know. I will wait. I will wait for you until the desert runs out of sand." Knowing her family would intercept any mail sent directly, he found another way. He gave the letter to a friend of a friend who worked in Jodhpur, someone who could bypass the family's guard and deliver it directly into her hands. Mira received the letter 2 weeks later. By then, her family had already fixed her engagement to Rayesh, the son of a wealthy businessman from Udaipur. The wedding was set for just 3 months away. She read Vikram's letter in the darkness of her locked room, the paper growing damp as tears streamed down her face. But through the sorrow, a flicker of defiance sparked. She knew what she had to do. She wrote back. It was a short reply, tucked carefully inside a book that she returned to the friend who had delivered Vikram's letter in the first place. Her message was simple, yet it held the weight of their entire future. I will never say goodbye to you. I will find a way to meet you there at midnight. We will leave together. We will start a new life somewhere they cannot find us. When Vikram read those words, his heart soared. The despair that had gripped him for weeks vanished, replaced by a surge of pure, unadulterated hope. They had a plan. They had a chance. Vikram worked tirelessly, saving every single rupee he could. He reached out to a distant cousin who lived in Mumbai, someone who could help them get on their feet in a new, anonymous city. He was building the foundation for their new life, one brick at a time. Meanwhile, Mira played the role of the obedient daughter. She stopped protesting the engagement. She went through the motions, a mask of calm acceptance hiding the storm raging inside her. She even attended the engagement ceremony with a placid smile, her hand feeling cold in Rayesh's as her heart raced with the secret she carried. Every nod, every polite conversation was a performance, buying them precious time. Then the day came, October 15th. Vikram left his home in Kori that afternoon. He told his family he was just going to Jaisalmer for supplies, a believable excuse. He boarded the bus to Jodhpur, clutching a small bag that contained everything he owned. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Inside his chest beat a heart full of courage, ready to defy the world for the woman he loved. The night was dark and heavy, with only a sliver of moon casting long, eerie shadows across the ancient stone. He found a spot in the darkness hidden from view, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. Every rustle of leaves, every distant sound made him jump. Midnight came and went. The air grew colder. Mira didn't arrive. He checked his watch. 12:30 a.m. Still no sign of her. The minutes stretched into an eternity. 1 a.m. A cold knot of dread began to form in Vikram's stomach. His hope, once so bright, began to waver. Maybe her family found out. Maybe she couldn't get away. At 2 a.m., the temple priest, making his final rounds, found him lurking in the shadows and kindly asked him to leave. Heartbroken and utterly confused, he took the first bus back to Kuri. His bag was still packed, his dreams shattered into a million pieces. What he did October 15th. For Mira, this was supposed to be the night everything changed. She had methodically prepared for her escape. A small, discreet bag filled with only the essentials was tucked away, hidden beneath her bed. She had poured her heart into a letter for her parents, a difficult mix of explanation, a plea for forgiveness, and an unwavering declaration of her choice. She couldn't stay. She couldn't go through with it. The plan was set. At 11 o'clock, she would wait for the silence of a sleeping house, a silence that meant freedom. Her room was on the second floor, a familiar space that now felt like a cage. She had practiced this once before, a clumsy trial run in the dead of night. Tying her bedsheets into a makeshift rope, a lifeline to the world outside and to a future with Vikram. But as she waited, heart pounding in her chest, the universe seemed to have a different script in mind. Her mother, restless and unable to sleep, felt an urge to check on her daughter. It was 11:15 p.m. when the doorknob turned. The scene that greeted her mother was undeniable. Mira, fully dressed, not in her pajamas. The corner of the bag peeking out from under the bed. And the most damning evidence of all, the knotted rope of bedsheets lying near the open window. The fragile quiet of the night shattered. The house didn't just wake up. It exploded with anger and disbelief. This time, the consequences were far more severe than just yelling and tears. There would be no more locked doors. There would be no more chances. The very next morning, before the sun had fully risen, Mira was bundled into a car. Her destination, her grandmother's house in Bikaner, a long 200 kilometers away. The instructions were cold and clear. Keep her there, under lock and key, until the wedding day. Her phone was gone. Every connection to the outside world was severed. There was no way to reach Vikram, no way to explain the silence, no way to tell. Months slipped by, and as custom dictated, Mira was married to Rayesh in a grand ceremony. Back in Kuri, Vikram carried on with his life, but the weight of unanswered questions, the ghost of a promise unkept, settled deep within his heart. He never married. Each time his family presented him with a potential match, he would offer a polite refusal, his excuse always the same. His heart was simply not ready. Years tumbled into one another, turning into decades. The sands of time shifted, and Vikram's father passed away, his mother following just a few years later. Through it all, Vikram remained in Kuri. He still carved the intricate patterns into wood. He still poured his soul into poetry. But the vibrant light that once danced in his eyes had dimmed, replaced by a quiet, enduring sorrow. Far away in the city of Udaipur, Mira lived a different life. She had 2 children, and her husband, Rayesh, was a kind man, though a certain distance always lingered between them. She was a dutiful wife and a loving mother, fulfilling all her responsibilities with grace. Yet a part of her soul never left the desert. It remained forever under that old neem tree, reliving those stolen, perfect moments with Vikram. She kept his letters hidden away, a secret treasure. Sometimes, in the quiet solitude of the afternoon, she would pull them out, her tears falling like rain on the faded ink, blurring the words of a love that was never meant to be. Then, in 2019, 32 years after they had first met, the universe conspired to write a new chapter. While cleaning out an old trunk, Mira's daughter, now a young woman herself, stumbled upon the bundle of letters. Curiosity piqued, she began to read. Page by page, she was drawn into the passionate, heartbreaking story of her mother's first love. Moved beyond words, she approached Mira, and for the first time in over 3 decades, Mira spoke of Vikram. She recounted the story of the desert poet, the promises made under the stars, and the silence that followed. Her daughter listened, her heart aching for the young woman her mother once was. Touched by this profound tale of love and loss, and wanting to offer her mother some form of peace, she decided to do something extraordinary. She set out to find Vikram. It was a difficult search, a needle in a vast desert haystack. But through the modern magic of social media and by reaching out to local contacts in Jaisalmer, she eventually found him. He was still in Kori, still a bachelor, still a poet. With a trembling hand, the daughter arranged a phone call. After 32 long years, a bridge was built across the silence. When Vikram picked up the phone and heard Mira's voice, a sound he thought he'd only ever hear again in his dreams, he broke down and wept. And on the other end of the line, so did she. They talked for 2 hours, the years melting away with every word. Mira finally explained what had happened that fateful night. The sudden illness, her father's firm decision, the marriage she couldn't escape. It wasn't a choice, but a circumstance she was forced into. Vikram listened, and then he shared his side. He told her about the endless waiting, the years that turned into decades of wondering, of imagining 100 different reasons for her absence, each one more painful than the last. In that single conversation, they found the closure they had both unknowingly craved. They forgave each other. More importantly, they forgave life for the path it had chosen for them. They never met again after that phone call. There was no dramatic reunion in the desert. Mira's life was firmly rooted in Udaipur with her husband, her children, her grandchildren. Vikram's life belonged to the quiet rhythms of Kori, to his carvings and his verses. They understood that some distances are not measured in miles or kilometers, but in lifetimes and choices made. But they had found peace. Their unfinished story didn't need a grand, cinematic ending. It just needed understanding. It needed the quiet grace of forgiveness. Today, Vikram is 70 years old. He still lives in Kori, and he still writes poetry. His hands, though aged, still carve beauty from wood. And sometimes, when the desert wind whispers through the dunes just right, carrying the scent of sand and time, he swears he can hear Mira's laughter, a joyful echo from a lifetime ago. This is the unfinished love story from the Thar Desert. It is a poignant reminder that not all love stories are destined for a happily ever after. Some remain suspended in time, their beauty lying precisely in their incompletion, like a poem with a missing final verse that lets you imagine the ending for yourself. If this story touched your heart, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Perhaps we all have an unfinished story somewhere in our past, one that's waiting for closure, or maybe one that's already perfectly complete in its beautiful, aching incompleteness. Thank you for listening. Until next time, keep loving, keep hoping, and never stop believing in the profound magic of stories. Make sure to subscribe for more dailies like this one.